G'day and welcome to Full Bore. I'm Steve Lanchester, and on this episode we're going to be putting some two-stroke oil into my car. Every once in a while a car manufacturer gets it so right that that car goes down in automotive history as being one of the true classics. Now, I am standing right next to said true classic. This is of course an LJ50 Suzuki, one of the most infamous four-wheel drives of the mid-70s. Now, it is a truly magnificent vehicle and there's a few reasons why it is so, but I'll show you the main one. So the powerhouse of this vehicle and its defining feature is of course the 3-cylinder 0.5 litre two-stroke engine. That, my friends, is a two-stroke, which has a few implications. One, of course, you've got to put two-stroke oil in a bottle here instead of normal engine oil, and it doesn't have a sump per se. And two, it is one of the most glorious sounding vehicles on the face of the planet. If you like combustion engines, this engine will get you saucy.
Compared to the FJ40 and the Nissan Patrol, the LJ50 Suzuki is a pretty obscure four-wheel drive today. Not a lot of people know much about them or have much to do with them, but in the mid to late 70s, they were an absolute hit with both farmers and the early four-wheel driving community. To a lot of young people, these things were the first key to actually go out and see the outback, and to an extent that's fairly similar to the FJ40, but the LJ50 and the subsequent LJ50 Suzukis were marketed much more to recreational four-wheel drivers, and that's predominantly because of their small size. One of my earliest memories is kicking around on the property in the back of one of these death traps, and the sound that they produce absolutely ingrains itself into the deepest parts of your mind.
One of my favourite features of this car, one that I'm quite proud of, is this exhaust pipe which goes up the back of the car, because that's just the thing that you do. In the back, we actually have a descendant of this particular vehicle. That, my friends, is a two-stroke lawnmower. So when you add that in conjunction with the engine that's in the front of the car, you have a total of 7 horsepower. Okay. We have a bonnet scoop on the roof. A roof scoop. You can see that. And that's to suck, that's cold air induction for the cab. That's added horsepower right there. Now, and I've given you a bit of a run through of this magnificent vehicle. We're going to try and get it going, because I reckon a car such as this deserves to be on the tracks. So this is said glorious 3-cylinder two-stroke engine. Now, this is capable of absolutely ripping the top off a rice pudding. Now, there's a few reasons why this thing was sitting in the middle of a field doing nothing. It used to run on 2 cylinders, yes, 2. And the main reason for that, I think it was fouling plugs, primarily because the idle circuit was blocked and you had to use the choke to get it to idle, which I reckon fouled the plugs. These things are pretty renowned for fouling plugs anyway, because of course two-stroke. It's also missing a radiator, which apparently is a pretty important part of a car. And of course a battery. We'll have to plumb up a fuel system of some sort, but it's got the old school clackety-clack style fuel pump, so it should mean that we should be able to get fuel pressure quite easily. And fingers crossed that we can get some brakes. The clutch is actually a clutch cable. Well, it utilises a clutch cable, so we don't have to bleed any clutch lines or nothing like that. So she should be a piece of cake. Yeah, she's looking pretty schmutzified. Okay, so that's a B7HS NGK plug. Of course, I'm going to call up my local auto parts store and order a set of these in. Okay, what I have here is some engine conditioner which has Japanese writing on it, so because of that it must be good. When they're that bad and you don't have a parts store, one thing you can do is any sort of foaming engine conditioner, like a decarb sort of spray, you can actually spray that on your plugs to get them to decarbonify themselves. And I can assure you decarbonify is definitely a word. I've got this fan belt which looks like it's about to self-destruct at any time. It literally has a split in it. Dank. That's some proper quality right there. Radiator fan belt. Better get this nest of highly flammable eucalyptus leaves out. Chewed through some wires here. Looks like I'll have to do a quick splicey splice using some high-tech gear. But yeah, this thing hasn't run in about 5 years, been sitting down in this field. The thing I always find with two-stroke Suzukis such as this is that they always seem to turn over. You could leave them in the bottom of the ocean, pull the engine back up and it'll still be able to turn over, and I think that's because they've got two-stroke oil on absolutely everything inside the engine. I think I'm ready to chuck a battery in it and see whether or not she turns over nicely. Turns over like butter. Wow, and even the fuel pump still works. This might be too easy. This is my patented fuel system in a can. It's just a fuel drum with fuel in it. The cap's got a hole in it with a pipe coming out. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3, and we'll see if we can get ourselves to prime up. Ah, that's definitely 91 octane. Oh. Now, here's a top tip for you. If you're a bush mechanic, you have to have one of these bad boys. Now, this is natural Australian spring water with about 87 octane benzene in it. And the reason being is you can just squishy it down in there for some extra bang skis when you go to start her up. Now, we'll see what the go is, hey? Nice! Around back here. Nice! That's awesome. Track.
With a bit of mucking around with the points and the ignition system, I found that it wasn't getting quite enough spark as what it should be. And once I got spark, I realised that the carby was jank, so I had to enlist the help of Davo, the mechanical wizard, who was born in the last century and therefore knows things about carburetors.
You love working with carbies, don't you, mechanical wizard?
Oh yeah, old school stuff. Not a transistor or a diode in sight.
Makes the back of your throat burn, doesn't it? Feels good.
I think the main jet might be a bit blocked. Is that the earth wire for the fuel pump? That must have been on the carby, was it?
That's a great place to have an earth wire, isn't it?
Well, I don't know.
You really want it.
Can only catch on fire. Alright, that'll do you.
So the battery's held in with some baling twine.
Yeah, it won't go anywhere past red zone.
Radiator's hooked up with some rope that I found on the ground.
Yeah, very rotten. Yeah, how rotten is it?
Pretty rotten. Coil cable has that weird bit of tape on it. There's a bottle of petrol right there. The fuel line is leaking a bit and it goes through the firewall into the cab. There's my fuel tank. Yeah, and I got no brakes.
Go test it, eh?
Yeah, I'll test it.
You just have to put the jack down.
So in the northern rivers of New South Wales, we've had some pretty hectic bushfires go through. As you can see, it's pretty well burnt out. It's just starting to come back with a bit of foliage in the trees, but in the background, we've got some dead four-wheel drives, which unfortunately perished in said bushfires. Up the top there, we've got a LN106 Hilux. Quite sad to see it's already starting to be robbed for bits for various Bunderas. 73 series Land Cruiser, also very sad to see. 67 Corona, Jackaroo, couple of Suzukis, and over there of course Lily, my first ever bush basher, and actually the first engine I ever rebuilt. Very sad to see, but somehow even out of all of this, this magnificent beast has survived. I don't know how, because cars around it got burnt, but it somehow survived. And we have, of course, today managed to get it back on the road and back where it needs to be, and that is in, of course, the bushland where we can go and make some tracks. Now I'll go and show you some of the modifications that I've recently made and finalise, of course, what I've done to get it back on the road. So we'll duck over and have a squizzy, hey? I'm pretty proud of some of the work that's gone on here. This car, of course, was sitting in a field for 5 years. It really didn't take a huge amount to get it going, but as of course you saw that it stopped running, and I had a few issues with spark and the
carby, which of course is just stuff that happens when a car's been sitting around for a while. What it turned out to be was the idle circuit was blocked, and it must have been blocked for a long time because the throttle was actually adjusted right up, so it was idling not on the idle circuit but on the main circuit, which is not really what you want to see. Filed the points. Trick that I used, and you probably didn't see it, I actually soaked the spark plugs in vinegar overnight to try and get rid of the carbon that was coating the ceramic, and I believe it was actually shorting out through that carbon. I wasn't getting good enough spark. There's a fuel line out of the carby which goes into my clackety-clack fuel pump, which I have now actually tack screwed to the inner fender here, which is super safe. That's not coming loose and shorting out on anything. It goes to a fuel filter just here, then that runs up, and I've actually used some of the OEM tabs on the firewall to hold that fuel line to it. Goes up through the firewall and into the cabin here. So, a bit hard to see there. There's another fuel filter, because why not? And then that runs up into the back, where I've actually got it strapped to the back of the passenger chair. Safety. So I finally got this bad boy running good enough to actually go four-wheel driving. So we'll give it a bit of a test up in the hills up in here. I've got my backup vehicle, which is a Kia Sportage. Sad, I know, but it's got 31-inch Simex centipedes on it, so it pretty much goes anywhere you point it. So we'll hop in this bad boy, see how we go, push a few new tracks up in the bushland, and see if we can't get ourselves into a spot of trouble. Oh, that was harder than I... Especially when it's running on 3 cylinders, it's quite good actually. Man, this thing's running like a dime. Check to make sure she's got enough water in it. Okay, as long as it don't even overheat it. But it's running magnificently. It's probably running as good as it's ran in the past 20 years. Let's hit the tracks again. Now that I've taken about 10 years off my life, I reckon it's probably about time we conclude this episode of Full Bore. And now I've had an excellent time getting this bad boy back on the road. But it's really made me stop and appreciate the true heroes of the four-wheel driving world, and they are the people who actually drove these things back when they were new. And I've got to say, this thing's a death trap now, and it would have been a death trap 50 years ago. And if you went to a Suzuki dealership and bought one of these new, you are a madman, because these things are just shockingly terrible, but they are super duper brilliant. And on that note, we'll catch you next time when we next meet on the next episode of Full Bore. Keep cruising.